could I thank you? Could I thank Julie for organising this for us? And could I thank all of you for signing up to come to this Ask Away meeting? Now, my role today is to ask our chair-elect, Allan Walmsley, your questions. Now, these questions have come from various sources. Some have been sent in when you when you registered for this on the governance email. Some of them have come, I've picked out of comments that have been made on the Facebook page and various other sources. So that's where we get them all from. And this is the third of our three Ask Away meetings, and was supposed to be just three, but there is actually a special one being run for the East of England. If any of you are from the East of England, on the 20th of September, there is an additional one. Now, if you have any additional questions you'd like to ask, could I ask you to please put them on the chat, and we'll do our best to get to them and make sure that we can answer those as well. If for any reason we run out of time, this event's planned to last for just 1 hour. If we do run out of time, we will make sure that we get answers sent to you for the questions that are that we are unable to get to here. So no question will go unanswered at all. Right, so let me begin. And Allan, first of all, can I thank you once again for taking the time to be with us this morning. That's where we're very pleased for that. And so I'll start.
Thanks, Neil. Morning, everybody.
I'll start straight away with the questions, so we get onto it. And the first one is, well, it's actually something that I picked up on the Fit for the Future Facebook page, and it appears to be some confusion over the number of council representatives from each nation or region. So, Allan, could you just clarify, is it 2 or is it 3?
So it's 2, and there's never been any other figure mentioned in terms of representation from the regions. Right from the very beginning, a couple of years ago, when these proposals were being put together, we looked at how what the composition of the council might be, and recognised that it would probably initially need to include all the in effect, what are the current regional trustees, and because of the workload, add 1 to each of the current sort of representation. So that made 2. The figure of 3 may well have appeared because the original proposal was for 3 representatives from networks in total. But when we did the original feedback analysis from the consultation program, there was quite a lot of criticism of that, and so the board agreed to drop that representation to 1 from Network Link, being the chair of Network Link. But in terms of representation from the regions, the proposal has always been for 2. I noticed on the, I don't know whether you're going to go on to this, Neil, but I noticed on Fit for the Future Facebook page, there was some debate about whether there should be more representation for certain regions where there are more U3As in a region than in other regions and nations. So when we started, I'd spoke to the previous chair, Ian McKenna, who had been involved in a consultation program in, I think it was 2016, and he'd said that they'd floated the idea of more representatives or more trustees at that time on the board from larger regions than smaller regions and nations. But it had been heavily criticised during a sort of a tour of the UK in 2016, and they dropped that idea. So we thought if you go into that sort of proportional representation, as well as the massive change of introducing a council and changing the representation, then that would be a step too far. So we decided to stay with 2 representatives per region. I personally don't have any view either way, and if at some stage in the future there's a move to try and increase representation from certain regions, then let's have a look at it at that stage, and obviously there'll need to be a consultation program and understand how the membership feels about it.
Well, thanks for that. I think that the misunderstanding came because in a response to one of the posts there, Liz Thackeray mentioned the lead volunteer or the lead representative. Could you just say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the proposal is for two representatives to come from each region and nation, and how those two almost divide the workload, it would be entirely up to the regions and the local regional management team to decide, depending on local circumstances. It might be that the region naturally falls into a north or a south or an east or a west or whatever, and so it's up to regions to decide how they wanted to do that. When looking at the workload, there are also lots of duties that the current trustees do, where they work as an extension of the office to try to, for instance, deal with with grievances, or it might be to support startups. So it might be, you know, lots of those activities. And there was a suggestion, in fact, there still is a suggestion, that if regions see an opportunity for a third person to operate those sorts of activities, to have a close liaison with the office and operate as an extension of the office in a region, then that would be up to the u3as in that region or nation to identify a third person, to either to elect one or to appoint one. We have trust volunteers in every region and nation, and sometimes many of those trust volunteers operate in that role. And so in effect, it would be one of those individuals operating as a lead volunteer and relieving the two representatives to focus on their representational roles.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the next question. It appears that there's major differences between the regions and their trustees. Some are really proactive and very engaged within their region, and others don't even realise that they have a regional trustee and have had little or no contact with them. Will the council change this dynamic?
You know, the communications that happen at the moment and between regional trustees and their u3as inevitably depend on the level of energy, enthusiasm, commitment of the regional trustees. And the level to which u3as understand what their trustees are doing obviously depends on how much they read, how much they understand about what's going on. Some regional trustees are really proactive, where there are very up-to-date web pages, websites, where there are regional communications going out, newsletters going out on a regular basis. There's lots of information going out to u3as. I remember when I was a trustee, I used to have a fireside chat every Friday morning with u3a chairs. And so it was always a question of how much information as a regional trustee can you get out to your u3as? And from a u3a point of view, how much are they going to listen and read, and how much do they want to know what's going on? So inevitably, some regional trustees will have a real close understanding of what's happening at local level. Other regional trustees perhaps have a more of a helicopter type principle. They might operate more at more on a tell me if you've got a problem and we'll help to deal with it. But other than that, I'll keep out of your hair. So different regional people operate in different ways.
Yeah, thanks. And I suppose that the council will change it in that instead of having one, there'll be two. There'll be twice the amount of resources available.
Well, so certainly, hopefully, there'll be twice the amount of resources available, and so that should give both u3as a closer relationship with one of those representatives, a closer understanding, if that's what those u3as want. So yes, in that sense, I guess the council will. I think also from a council point of view, we need to make sure that there's both structured communication and sort of informal personal communication channels So there'll be sort of standard reports coming out, information coming out from the council that all U3As will have the opportunity of reading and understanding and taking part in. But equally, we'll expect the council representatives as well to be reporting back to U3As and picking up information from U3As, getting the views of U3As so that they can reflect those views at council meetings. But again, the effectiveness of this sort of thing will depend very much on the level of commitment and energy and enthusiasm of those council representatives.
Okay, thank you. Moving on. So when the council's in place, how will we measure and judge its success? So what will success look like?
Well, we've the board has said, and there'll be there's some more information coming out to U3As in the next few days. We've said that there will be a review after 3 years of what will be the effectiveness of the council. So it'll be things like asking all the council representatives, have you got the opportunity to communicate with your U3As? Have you got the opportunity to feed in those views into the council discussions? Do you feel like you're able to effectively operate within the council? Do you see outputs from the council? Do you see things happening, decisions being made on the basis of the discussions that are being held? Once those decisions are made, do you see things happening within the movement as a result of those decisions? I think we'll also be expected to ask U3As, those U3As who are interested and who want to have a greater involvement and communicate through these representatives. Have you seen a change? Have you seen a change in terms of, are you able to get your views to your representative? Is your representative reflecting those views at council meetings? So it'll be all of those sorts of things. And I think we'll be looking at what the relationship would be between the council and the board. Is the council promoting collective views of U3As and making decisions and getting things done in the way that the board would expect them to do, because it's the board that's promoting these proposals. So I think all of those sort of questions would go into a melting pot. And there would be sort of structured feedback analysis and to understand how effective the council and its arrangements have been.
Yeah, given you mentioned that there'll be sort of a review in 3 years' time, and this relates to a question that I've got here that someone wants to ask about if there was required to make further adjustments to the Articles of Association. The question asks, how can we be assured that the membership will be fully consulted?
Well, as you know, any change to the Articles of Association need a special resolution and need 75% approval from the membership, from the U3As who are voting, just like at this AGM in October. So if there's any future change to the Articles of Association, the board would be crazy to put anything up to the AGM if they didn't feel like it would have the support of a large number of the U3As. And the only way that you can find that out is by having a consultation program, by making sure that all the information's available, by giving presentations, by giving these sorts of Q&A sessions, lots of different ways that you can try and get the message over and pick up the feedback. So that's how I think we would expect any future review to be conducted. That's if there are to be any future changes to the Articles of Association, then that's how I guess we would expect the consultation to happen.
And as you point out, in the end of the day, it's the U3As who have the final decision at an AGM or an EGM on these things, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, yes. You know, and to change the Articles of Association is a major piece of work, and I've said on a number of occasions we've sort of been at this for a couple of years now to develop it and bring it to this point. And so the AGM in October is the opportunity for U3As, if they want to become part of this U3A representation on the U3A Council, then it's for them to vote, and we need to get 75% of those who are voting in favour of the proposals.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, if you look at what's some of the posts on the Facebook page, Fit for the Future Facebook page, it's clear that some members, at least, feel there's insufficient detail to help U3As make a decision at this point in time. And I just wondered, Alan, what your reaction to that would be.
You know, what is insufficient detail to some people is too much detail to others. I get quite a few emails from U3As saying, oh, we don't want any more coming out. We don't want to read any more documentation. Just give us the bare bones. I think on the last Ask Away, there was one lady asking, just show us a simple chart. Well, there'll be a simple chart coming out in the next couple of days. And so some people are quite happy to understand the concept at quite a superficial level, and as long as they understand that superficial level, then they're comfortable. Inevitably, there are other people who want to take a very detailed view of it, and they want to see every I dotted and every crossed, and they're not happy, or they can't see the picture until all of that detail is filled in. Now, again, people will have different views on how much detail they need to be able to understand something. What we've tried to do is put a huge amount of detail out there. There's a lot of detail that's been released at different stages because we didn't want to overpower people right at the beginning, and so it's been released in stages. There'll be some more detail coming out in the next couple of days. But there's also a lot of work that's also been done, that if this goes through at the AGM, then we already have quite a few processes ready that are on the shelf that we can take down off the shelf and say, right, here we go. This is how we can get the election process underway. So I think my view is, I think people need to read the information that is available to them, either information that's gone out or information that's on the web page. And if there's more detail that they need specifically, then send us an email, contact us, contact any of the regional trustees and ask the question. The question will find its way through to probably a steering group of members that have been trying to develop these things. Everything that comes into the governance email account, either I respond to personally or the CEO, Sam Moger, responds to individually, and we provide as many answers as we can to the questions that are coming in.
Thank you very much. I noticed that we've now got quite a few questions coming on the chat, so I'm going to turn to the chat at this stage, if I may. And the first two are kind of related. The first one says, will the council have its own budget, and will it be at its liberty to spend without recourse to the board or the CEO? And the second one says, how independent will the council be? So I think we can put those two together for you, Alan.
Okay, let me deal with the independence one first, and I'll come back to the budget one. Remind me if I forget about that one, Neil. So in terms of independence, we have to recognise that the board of directors on the Third Age Trust, these are the regional trustees at the moment, those individuals are legally liable for the way in which the trust, the charity operates. They're legally responsible. The council members, when we set up the council, those are not legally responsible. There's only the trustees of the charity or the directors of the company, both the same thing in the Third Age Trust. They have the legal liability. So it's important that the board always has, as it were, the final say in anything that happens. But it's just like your own U3A. Your U3A has a committee with a chair. That committee are the trustees, and they are legally liable for what happens within that charity. But also you have interest group coordinators, you have interest group leaders, all of which are making decisions at different times of the day, the week, the month, without recourse to the committee. It's inevitable that if interest group leaders want to do something that's contrary to your u3a committee, then obviously they've got to ask the committee for permission. But otherwise, they have a very wide sphere of operation to get on with things, make their decisions and do things. And that's how I see the council operating. I see the council as operating in all the areas that it should be able to operate in. And we won't know what all of that is until the council starts operating. But in one of the documents that's on the webpage, there are 11 examples there of areas where I would expect the council to be able to make decisions, get on with things, deal with things. And the council will have responsibility for the work of 3 strategy groups as well, and all of the work that they'll be doing and making decisions on those, getting them implemented, moving them on. The area where, and also in the annual planning budget, they'll have enough money to do that, because the money will be allocated in the annual plan, based on the types of projects and the resources that are needed to get on with those projects. The area where the council might need approval for something that's new, something that's not in the annual plan, something that needs the board approval, would be something that's not in the budget, something that's come up during the year that's not been budgeted. Just like at the moment, if something comes up that's not been budgeted, then the board has to decide whether to add it to the budget or whether to say, no, that's not in the budget, and so you can't do it this year. And the council would be exactly the same. And that would be, my analogy with your local u3a would be exactly the same. That would be an interest group leader coming up and saying, I want to do this, that, and the other. It's going to cost us this. We didn't take that into account at the beginning of the year. Can we do it? And so it would come up to the board. Now, if the council come to the board with a recommendation to do something and spend more money on something, and they're able to demonstrate this is the collective view of u3as, this is in the interests of u3as, then I think the board would be pretty stupid to turn that down. And the reason I say that is for 2 reasons. There's legislation at the moment, because the third age trust is a company. There's legislation that says that company has to manage its activities and its money for the interests of the shareholders, and the shareholders in this case are u3as. And so if the board decided not to do that, then it's leaving itself wide open to legal action. Secondly, the third age trust is a charity, and the charity has to devote its funds to the purpose, the object clause, which is basically to further learning in older people. And if for whatever reason it turns down a recommendation from the council that does exactly that, then again it's leaving itself open to criticism from the Charities Commission and for members to complain to the Charities Commission that the board is using its funds in some way other than for its purpose, or it's not using the funds in furtherance of its purpose. So both of those circumstances, I think the board would leave itself wide open. So at the moment, I cannot imagine a situation where the council would ask to do something extra to the annual budget, something that's not been planned at that time, where the board would not support it, as long as the council can demonstrate that's the sort of thing that u3as are behind, and it's the collective view of u3as.
Thank you very much.
A bit of a long-winded answer. Sorry about that, Neil.
No, well, I mean, it's you do need to get all the information out, don't you? Right. Will a council of 25 plus be just as unwieldy as a board of 18, and will decisions ever get made?
I don't think decision-making has anything to do with the number of people. I think decision making is all about the commitment of the people who are making the decisions, about the chair and the way in which the chair manages the situation. So I think council of 26 people can make decisions just as much as it can if it's 10 or 15 people. It does mean that there will be more different views. Accept that. 26 different views might be possible. I think that's highly unlikely because most representatives will be picking up the same messages and they'll be wanting to put the same messages to their to the council. So I don't think 26 is too big a toll. I think the board currently has 18, which includes some co-opted members as well. I think the reason we say that's too big is because the trustees on that board are trying to do 2 or 3 different jobs. And so when you're trying to do lots of different jobs all at the same time, then decision making becomes almost either becomes a bit too automatic, they sort of follow a lead blindly, or they don't devote as much attention as really as perhaps a smaller board might do when it's focusing specifically on the governance arrangements.
Thank you very much. Just to let everybody know that I'm not picking up and reading out individual comments. You can all read those at your leisure. I'm just picking out questions that I'm giving to Allan. And the next one is, how will the resources for u3as be increased by the council? I suppose it depends which resources, isn't it?
Yeah. If you're meaning resources as in money, and I don't think it's going to significantly change the resources available to u3as. There are already various grants available to u3as that the board has defined those grants and made money available. The council, I would expect, in a similar way, would make those resources available to u3as through grants in exactly the same way. If you mean in terms of people, well, it's not going to change the number of people available to u3as. I would hope, of course, that the council would play quite a major role in promoting the profile and recruitment and retention of members. So I guess that might help u3as. But other than that, I'm at a bit of a loss on that question, Neil.
Yeah, well, I suppose one other resource they get is they've got 2 people in the region looking at working to help them rather than 1.
That's a fair comment, yeah. And if there is a lead volunteer in the region or nation, then I guess that might strengthen some of the support services that are available from the office for those u3as who need it. But we do recognise lots and lots of u3as don't need it.
Thank you. Maggie, you've put a very long chat there. I don't know if it's a question or a statement. I haven't got the ability to read all that in one go. So if you'd like to try and turn it into a short question, that'd be fine if you don't mind. Right, there's a few statements here. Right, Heather, let's get next. How will the resources for individual u3as be improved by? Oh, sorry, I've just done that one. I think that's the same question. Right. Let's get down to another question. There's quite a lot of just statements here. Right. Okay. Yeah, I can't see a huge change shift in local. Okay, yeah, no, many of these are just not questions, they're just statements that people can read. It's not something I specifically can ask you. Allan, I've got some others that we didn't pick up before. And one of those, okay. Some members say the council will have insufficient independence from the board. You've already said something about that already. I don't know if there's anything more you want to say about it.
I don't think so. I don't want to portray the council in a subordinate position to the board, but we have to recognise that the board, at the end of the day, is the body that will have the legal liability for how the charity operates. So to me, it's inevitable that whilst you can create as much scope as possible for the council to do this, do that, make decisions on this, make decisions on the other. If push comes to shove, and if the council and the board for some reason find themselves at loggerheads, then we have to recognise that it's the board that will have that legal responsibility and has to make the final decisions. But as I explained earlier, I think the board would have to think very, very deeply before it refused some recommendation from the council. But I would hope we'd never get into that situation. I would hope that we would get into a situation where the council and the board have regular communication, regular understanding of what's going on, that the council develops its sphere of operation in a way that benefits the council and U3As, and that the board builds confidence that the council can get on with this, can get on with that, and that's the way the future really should be. Because at the moment, having the board making all the decisions is just unworkable. It's just not working well at all, and it's putting trustees off. It's creating a huge workload for trustees, and that's really very ineffective when it comes to governance.
Okay, I've had a chance to read more of these chat ones. So I've got one here. The proposals signal a huge change, a shift from a local focus to something more nationally focused. There are many questions about something and whether that shift will benefit local U3As.
Well, I wouldn't put it that way. I wouldn't say that this represents a shift from national to local or from local to national. I've said many times, those U3As who are very comfortable with what they're doing, want to get on with what they're doing, and basically don't want any interference from anybody, then in this context, that's fine. They should be able to get on with it, and nobody's going to interfere with them in that way. However, we do know that within the movement, there are lots of U3As who want more representation, want more involvement, want more say in what happens, want more understanding of why certain decisions are made, and to be able to contribute to decisions. And it's for those people, those U3As, those individuals, that we're trying to create this opportunity, create this platform of a council. Now, I think what it will do is move the focus away from the part representation and part governance on the board to a clear separation between governance on the board and representation on the council. And that will make it much clearer for people to understand that when issues come up, are they a governance issue or are they a U3A representation issue? If it's governance, then the board will deal with it. If it's U3A representation, then I would expect it to be dealt with by the council. And if you look at those 11 examples that have been up on the website for a good couple of months now, they are all areas where I think U3As have a legitimate interest and involvement, and U3As should have a much greater say in what happens about those issues, how the decisions are made, who makes the decisions, what happens when those decisions are made, how they're implemented. And that's what we expect the council to be able to do. At the moment, those decisions were made by the board. And in my view, that was the wrong place for those decisions to be taken.
Thank you very much. The next question I've got here, we give our speaker liaison a budget at the beginning of each year, and he is then at liberty to spend that amount without coming back to the committee. Why can't the council be given a budget to spend as they see fit?
Well, they will do. So the council, each planning period, just like every organization, every company, every major charity, we have a planning cycle. And the planning cycle starts around now. It starts September, October. And it's basically all the stakeholders, all the heads of departments, committee chairs, and all of those putting in what they think should be happening next year, both in terms of projects, costing out those projects, what resources would be required, how much is going to be involved. And that comes together as a budget. And the annual plan includes a budget and strategic aims for the following year. And that normally comes to a head around February, March time. So normally the board approves the final budget in March, ready for the next financial year. All of those projects and all of the work that needs to be done by the council will have been costed in there, and that money will become the council budget to progress those projects. So it's getting a chunk of money to progress those projects. And the council will then have the freedom to get on with those projects in the way that it feels it should be doing that. A lot of that work will be done by these strategic groups. A lot of the work might be done by council, task and finish groups, different types of working parties, whatever we call them. But this is work that the council will be responsible for, will be in charge of. And the board will not be involved in all of those things. The board will say, you've got your budget, you've got your projects, you've got everything that needs to be done. This is what we need to achieve during this coming year. And the board will sit back and wait for reviews. And they'll get reviews every, whatever, quarter, something like that, and see what the progress is that's being made. As I said earlier, it's only if something pops up that's outside that planning cycle, if something pops up during the year in question, that's when the council would need to decide whether to progress it. And if they do want to progress it, to go to the board and say, this wasn't included in the original planning cycle, but this is what we want to do for this reason and that reason and the other. And that's when the board will make a decision whether to add it to the budget. And here are all the consequences of that. Or the board might argue, well, no, there's other priorities. We need to do this, we need to do that. So that's where there'll be obviously, hopefully sensible debate and discussion about what needs to be done.
Thank you very much. Next question is, what's the term of office for each elected? It says committee member, but I presume it means council member.
So 3 years. I think it says 3 years in the, I think in the council terms of reference at the moment, and that's exactly the same as the board, as the board trustees. I think also there's an opportunity for the council rep to then stay on for additional years, but I can't remember the detail. But certainly the normal term of office will be 3 years.
Right, thank you very much for that. Apologies if I've missed any of the questions. If I have, then please put a chat on there and remind me to go back to it. Let's just have a look. Right, where are we now? How many decisions do the board currently make that actually affect us at local level? Well, that's, well.
You know, so some of the decisions that the board make are purely associated with governance. There are policy decisions to do a policy on this and a policy on that, and I guess if those are template policies for u3as, then it's up to u3as whether to follow those templates. We obviously provide advice via member services, and so the board makes decisions about staffing, about the resources that are needed for the coming year to meet the annual plan requirements. So I guess some of those will depend on the board makes decisions about, for instance, how many people would be required in member services or in the communications group. So when u3as ring up, sometimes there might not be sufficient people to answer the telephones or deal with emails or whatever. So I guess those are board decisions that affect u3as. Equally, I think, arguably every decision that the board takes at some stage should have an impact on the Third Age Trust, which includes all of the members, all of the subcommittees, all of the beacon grouping, what happens in regions and networks. These are sort of board decisions that have been taken over the years that I would imagine eventually cascade down to U3As. But we do know that there are U3As who treasure their independence, like to get on with things in their own way, and manage their own affairs, and have very little interest in what happens at the Third Age Trust level. So the great thing about the U3A movement is its diversity of opinions, which obviously are a strength, but equally sometimes a weakness.
Thank you. Right, next question. The consultation identified a high level of support for the idea behind the idea of the changes. Should the AGM not approve the proposals, what plan does the board have to ensure that the idea is developed into something that does attract the necessary level of support from U3As?
Well, we'll have to see what happens at the AGM. Obviously, I'm hopeful that the proposals will receive the approval, the 75% approval. If they don't, then that will leave the board in somewhat of a limbo position. The board will have to decide at that stage. I think a lot depends on what the vote is, but the board will have to decide whether there was quite significant support, but it didn't quite hit the 75%, in which case what are the things that can be done to bring it back to the membership at either at another AGM or an EGM, or the board will say, well, clearly these proposals are not acceptable to U3As, and so they'll go back to the drawing board, and at some stage in the future reconsider whether it's worth putting any proposals forward. I think at the moment we recognise that there is a lot of support. There has always been a lot of support within U3As. Inevitably, there is a noisy grouping who argue that the proposals are flawed for whatever reason. I think it's up to U3As to make up their own minds. Certainly, as far as the board is concerned, we spent a lot of time developing these proposals. We spend a lot of time getting advice from different agencies, from different charities, from legal advice and all the rest of it. And we believe these are the best proposals to put forward. I think also people, U3As, really should look at it from the point of view of nothing's ever going to be perfect from the beginning. These are proposals that would launch the movement on a path that is completely new, is something that's never been done by the U3A movement before. And nobody, including myself, has any idea how this will turn out. What we want to do is put sufficient structure in place to encourage people to come forward and to be enthusiastic and committed and make it work. And there will always be an element of let's get together, work out how we can do this together and make it work. I don't have a plan B. I've said all along, I don't think there is a plan B. Well, certainly not in my head, there's no plan B. I think we would have to see what would happen. I already detect an awful lot of fit for the future fatigue. People are already saying to me, have we not had enough of this? This is going on, dragging on and dragging on, isn't it? So I personally, I don't see any great value in another 6 months or 12 months of debate on this. I think at the end of that period, there'll still be the same debates that there are now going on, because inevitably lots of different members have lots of different opinions. But the board has the legal responsibility for promoting these proposals, and these are the best proposals that we think in these circumstances would give us the best opportunity of future governance. So we'd have to see what would happen.
Thank you, Alan. Next question. As there will be 2 members from each council, there will be additional costs involved. Will this mean an increase in subscriptions from individual u3as?
Well, I think anybody who wants to know an answer to that just has to look at the finances of the Third Age Trust. It's quite clear if you follow the finances over the last couple of years that the trust has significant reserves. Those reserves are earmarked for various projects, and we believe that those projects would take the movement forward, irrespective of this fit for the future stuff. So we've said, I think now for the last 2 years, that there is no prospect of an increase in subscriptions. I think there was a figure of 2028 mentioned. That was the first time that anything like this might, the need for any increase in subscriptions might pop up. The amount of money that we believe an extra council, an extra representative would consume is relatively minor compared to the over £3.5 million turnover that the Third Age Trust has at the moment, including the trading company. So it's a very, very small amount of money in relation to all of that. And I cannot see that any increase in representation and the extra amount of money that would be associated with that could ever justify an increase in the subscriptions. I think if we ever got to the stage of justifying an increase in subscriptions after 28 or 29 or whenever, then it would be on the basis of the whole picture, which includes all the projects and everything, not just the increased costs of introducing a council.
Thank you. Next question. Why not test run the council for a year before making any legal changes to the Articles of Association? And that also there's a little extra bit on that one which points out that, excuse me, I've just lost it. Yeah, that the pilot council had no executive powers, so that's not quite the same.
So we've been trying to run a pilot council for the last 12 months. In fact, I think slightly more than 12 months, 18 months, I think it is, yeah. Where we've had almost a shadow council operating with 2 representatives from each region, one of which has been the existing regional nation trustee. And it's had, I think it's had four meetings or so per year. I think in total, probably it's had about 6 meetings, of which I can't remember, but let's say 3 of them have been online and 3 of them have been face to face. And that has tried to simulate what would happen if we had a council. But inevitably, it's been a bit artificial. The members who've been there have not been elected as council members would be. There hasn't been the same communication channels that we would expect there to be with a new council. There hasn't been the same structure and the same way of operating and the same contribution to the annual budgeting cycle that I would expect in the future. So whilst it's given us some experience, it's not been a perfect simulation of what could happen in the future. Also, because it's only a bit of a shadow arrangement, it's not had any of the decision-making powers that we would hope the future council would have. So it's given us some ideas, but I don't think it's been a particularly good example. But we've tried that. What was the second part of the question, Neil? I've forgotten.
Well, no, it was just saying. Well, the first part of the question was, shouldn't we try this out with a pilot council? So let's just have a look. I get the original question was, why not test run the council for a year before making the legal changes to the Articles of Association? And the follow-up bit to that I was pointing out was that exactly what you've just said. It had no executive powers, and somebody else has gone on and asked, what was the pilot council meetings done actually addressed that would have been dealt by the council if elected?
Well, I can see 3 or 4 people who are on the call today who attended various pilot council meetings. I'm not going to go through the agendas. I can't remember, but some of them have been quite useful. Some of them, but the whole point of the pilot council really has been to get the views of those individuals rather than the views of the u3as that they represent. And so that's why it's been a little bit artificial, and it's not had any executive powers because it's not a formal council that's set up under the Articles of Association. And the problem is, until you change the Articles of Association, you really don't get any sense of what a council can and cannot do. You can't run a sort of a mock council with all the powers that you think a council should have, but without changing that relationship with the board.
I think the final pilot council is in a week or so's time, isn't it? Do you know?
It is, yes.
Yeah. Do we know if council members what they think of its effectiveness?
Well, they're going to be asked at that meeting,
Right.
so that's going to be a bit of a dip check to see what those council members have thought about their experience over the last 18 months. Not all of them have been there over the 18 months. Some of them have chopped and changed. That's been another problem in trying to sort of test a council. So they'll be asked at that stage. And I think most people, we did some feedback, I think 1 or 2 meetings ago, and most of the members at that stage felt that things had improved over the 18-month period. You know, I think we all accepted it had a fairly shaky start because nobody knew what to do and how to do it. But things have improved over the last 18 months, and there have been some really interesting discussions, certainly at the last couple of meetings, and I'm sure there will be on the 18th of September.
Okay, let's have a look. Can you give some examples of the types of projects that the council might want to promote?
Well, I refer everybody back to that list of 11 things. Let me give you a couple of examples. I noticed on the Fit for the Future Facebook, there's some comment about grants. So at the moment, the board decides the grant policy, and it says, here's a chunk of money that we're going to give to u3as to help them in various ways. Some are startup grants, some are grants to encourage recruitment, some might be for particular open days, some might be for large shows, things like that. And the board currently makes the decision on how those grants are defined, what categories they would fall into. And we're really second guessing u3as and telling u3as this is what you should be doing, rather than u3as saying it would be great if we had a grant for this and this is the outcome we could get and this would be the benefit. So my view in future is that things like how the grant money is divvied up, how u3as are able to take advantage of those grants, the definitions of those grants could be decided by the council, not by the board. And that would enable u3as to feed up through their council reps how they felt that the grants money could be allocated, not to individual u3as, but for the purposes of each of the grants. So that's one example. The second one that I put in there is at the last AGM, there was a resolution to achieve 500,000 members by the end of 2028. And the whole purpose there is to try to increase the profile of the movement and support u3as in their local recruitment and retention processes. And a lot of that work has been referred from the board to various departments, and then the feedback is coming back to the board, and the board's making any decisions about what to do. For example, do we do a campaign on Boom Radio? Yes, we did. Are we going to extend that campaign and rerun it for another 3 months? And the board would normally have made those decisions. If we have a council, and this is an issue that will go to this council meeting on the 18th of September, if we have a council, then whilst the resolution itself remains as it were, board property, all the actions that are needed in order to make that resolution, to achieve that resolution, could and should be the responsibility of the council. The council, through the strategy groups, should be able to influence the ways in which the movement responds, the way the movement makes itself more attractive to the next generation, makes it how the movement manages its profile nationally, how u3as are supported locally in their recruitment and retention. And that, to me, would be a prime area for the council to decide, and not the board. Now, I would expect every quarter for that review to go back to the board, and the board to make sure that they understand what progress is being made, so that the board can then respond to the next AGM and say, this is the progress we've made on that resolution that you passed at the last AGM. But the work on what's done, how it's implemented, what money's involved in, all of those sorts of things, to me, is an area that the council should have a major contribution and should be able to make significant decisions about.
Thank you, Alan. Right, I'm conscious of the time, but we've got quite a few questions left. I'll see if we can do these as quickly as possible. How many u3as voted to support the proposed changes? Not percentage, but numbers. Well, to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been a vote as such, has there?
No, there hasn't. There hasn't. No.
Okay. Will regional management teams continue to exist? And if so, how will they relate to and work with the council?
Well, I would hope they would continue to exist. In fact, I would hope that more regions could have more structure and have regional management teams or regional support groups, however you define them. They're, I think, in my view, pretty important, but it's patchy around the country at the moment. How would the council influence that? Well, there'd be two people, hopefully, who had a much greater involvement and knowledge of what's going on in that region than at the moment having a single regional trustee, and they would have a much more detailed understanding and practical knowledge of what's happening. And so I would hope that that would feed through to a more effective regional management team.
Thank you very much. Do you think you would have had to produce as many documents and so many presentations, etc., if the idea was what the u3a as a movement was happy to move forward with?
Well, that's back to this, how much detail do you want? Some people want less detail, some people want more detail. It's impossible to decide. To be honest, whatever we do, you're damned, I'm afraid. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Yeah, okay. The next question. There might be the same debate after a trial period in 2025, but don't you think you would then have the data and experience to use in forward planning?
Well, certainly there will be a review. If this goes through, there'll certainly be a review. The problem is, unless you do it properly, unless you allocate decision making and you allocate money in the right sort of way to the council with authority to get on with it and do it, then it's very difficult to review a halfway house. It's very difficult to review something where, well, we'll give you a bit of an opportunity to do a bit of this and a bit of that, but you don't really have full authority to do it. So it stays with the board, does that. So I don't see a halfway house operating. You've either got to do it or not do it, in my view.
Okay, we are at about 1 o'clock, but there are a couple of questions left. So should we, are you all right to carry on for a few moments? I
I'm
know
happy
you've
for
got
5
other
minutes if you
appointments.
wish, yeah.
Okay, right.
I'm okay for 5 minutes.
Okay, fine. I will. Well, if we don't get to the end of all the questions, we'll answer them offline, won't we?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. If the u3a membership hits the 500,000, then the trust will have more income. On that basis, they should not need to increase the fees for the foreseeable future.
The problem is, as the size of the movement increases, the demand on services and resources from the office or from the committees or from the beacon and site works and all of those things, all of those costs increase because more resources are required to manage a greater size movement. So it's not a simple one that says, oh, there's more money flowing into the third age trust, therefore you don't need to increase subscriptions. It's a question of looking year on year, and we've got forecasts, and the forecasts at the moment, if we can draw down on the reserves that we have at the moment to map the projects that are ongoing at the moment. Then I still think it's going to be 28, 29 before anybody starts thinking about any subscription increases.
Right. Well, it's a historical question. It's about subs subscriptions. It says if there's been no need to increase the subscriptions for the past two years, why were we asked to increase them in 2022? It's a bit of a historical question.
Well, there was a different view taken in 21, 22. And that's why the board went to the AGM at the time for an increase. Inflation was fairly rampant at that time. There was a different view of how the money was being spent and where it was spent. Since then, there's been much greater financial management. There's been much greater focus on where the money's spent, how it's spent, why it's spent. And that's why we've continued to run a reserve. The reserve was built up before COVID, and it was continued during COVID, and we still have quite a sizable reserve. To a certain extent, we're not able to spend the money on projects as fast as we should do, because very often projects are coming in at a lower rate, and we're able to use more members for projects than was originally expected, rather than external agencies. So, but at the moment, the finances are very healthy. The finance director, the treasurer, sends out a report to all treasurers, and I think it goes to chairs as well on a regular basis. So anybody who's interested in the finances, have a look at that. And there'll be lots of information obviously coming out shortly for the AGM.
Thank you. Next question. Will there be a council chair? And if so, what powers will he or she have? Two people have already answered that question, at least in part. And I believe there's a role description as well, isn't there, Alan?
Yeah, so there'll be a role description for that, and also for the council reps, quite detailed ones that'll be coming out. Well, they'll be going on the website in, I would estimate, about a week or so. But yeah, the appointment of the chair has been a difficult one to decide, I have to admit. What we're trying to do is balance the needs of u3as, balance the needs of the council, and balance the needs of the board. All of the senior appointments in the movement are made by the board. That's a clear position at the moment. So all the chairs of the committees, chair of Network Link, chair of Tattle, all of those things, it's the board that makes those decisions. So the board has to have the ultimate decision on who the council chair is, but equally we want u3as to be able to promote individuals through nominations that who think they've got the necessary skills. But equally, we also recognise the council needs to have a say in this, and that's why those nominations will go to the council, and the council will decide probably 1, 2, or 3 individuals to put to the board for the board to make the final decision. So we think that's a compromise way of appointing the council chair.
Thank you very much, Alan. I think that's all the questions. If I've missed any in the chat, my apologies. It wasn't intended, but well, we have now, I think, time to finish now, isn't it? So thank you all very much for your attending. I hope you found it useful for you, and we'll see you again sometime. Bye for now.